We are continuing with the topic organisms and population, and today we'll be talking about the population growth that is a part or that is an important topic in this particular chapter. Now, you all know that population growth is an important parameter for us to understand that how the species are able to thrive in a particular habitat. It actually helps us to understand whether the population of a given species is successful or not to survive in that habitat. Now, when we talk of the population of a particular species, it is not stable or static at all times. It is continuously, the number is either increasing or decreasing. That means it is in a dynamic state and it keeps on changing depending upon various factors. And these factors, maybe most important, can be the food availability or the prevailing weather conditions, the type of competition the species faces, the predators, maybe a new predator may be added to the habitat that may cause a decrease in the population, or the competition can be reduced. Competition may be reduced due to which the species can thrive, or the competition can increase due to which the limited resources are available for food and the space, and as a result the species will not be of a population will not be able to thrive. So there are various factors that affect the population of a particular species. Now, this change in the population density actually gives us an idea whether the population is increasing or declining. That means when we talk of population density, it is the total number of organisms. The population density is the total number of organisms which are present in a particular habitat. It is, we are talking of one species, like that particular species. Now, the causes mainly which are responsible for the population in a given habitat is affected mainly by the four processes, like those factors which we were discussing, that food availability and all. These were the main causes or the factors, but there are four major factor this causes which cause the increase or decrease of population density. These are major, those are underlying. Because of like food, the species may decide to, lack of food availability, the species may move from that particular place or that particular habitat in search of better food, where the place where the better food availability is there. So, out of these four processes, two processes cause an increase in the population density, while two processes cause a decrease in the population density. Now, here in this figure, when you see over here, there are population growth, we are talking of population density, there are two factors or two causes which increase the population density. So, natality and immigration add to the population density. That means if we say B and I, they cause an increase in population density. They will cause an increase in the population density. When we talk of natality, natality is represented as B, and it is the number of birth which is taking place during a given period in a particular population. And when we are referring to the word population over here means we are talking of a particular species. There can be many species accommodating a particular habitat, but we will be like one species we are taking. So the natality will be number of births which are taking place in that given time in a population. So it will add to the population density. When we talk of immigration, immigration is the total number of individuals of a particular species that have come from another habitat to this habitat. So over here, what is happening? So the same species, the birth rate is there, that is the due to birth, the population density increases, and the immigration is the movement of the same species from other habitat to this habitat. So overall, there will be an increase in the population density. The two factors that cause decrease in the population density are the mortality and the immigration. So immigration, when we say D and E, they will cause decrease in population density. This is because mortality is the rate of death. So if the number of deaths in a given population in a given period, the population density will decrease. Also, the emigration, that is the number of individuals of that species which are leaving this particular habitat and moving to some other habitat, and the causes can be again different, like food availability, the competition, the predation, or the prevailing weather conditions or other things. So due to which the species decide to move from one habitat to the other habitat. So this will result into a decrease in the population density. Now, we can calculate the population density. That is, if the population density at a time t, that is nt plus t plus 1, is, then it can be calculated in 1 as b, that is the total number of birth plus the immigration that has taken place in a particular habitat, minus d plus e, that is the death rate, plus e, that is emigration. So from this we can conclude that if B plus I is greater than D plus E, then obviously the species, or so that is the population density, will increase. So if this happens, then the result will be increase in population density. But if the birth rate and the immigration is less, then the opposite will happen. So if you see over here, under the normal circumstances, with the availability of resources and the weather conditions, we find that the most important criteria, because the immigration and emigration are depending upon certain conditions, but the death and the birth are two major factors that play major role in the population density. So here we find that the birth rate, that is the B and D, they are more important for a stable habitat. That means that has been thriving, that is allowing the population to grow for a longer period of time. Whereas the immigration and emigration play major role where the colonies are developing new or newly developing habitat. So B and D for the habitat which are already developed, and I and E for the areas where the this habitat is still in the process of developing. Now, when we talk of the population density, the population growth, it is important for us to understand or to predict the growth of population of an organism, and this can be done with the help of population growth models. Population growth models actually helps us to understand the growth of a population, how it is taking place within a given habitat. Now, it depends on number of factors. When we study the population growth, it depends on number of factors. That is, one important is the number of times the organism reproduces. Because if more number of times the organism reproduces, it will increase the rate of birth. Per capita we are talking, and the birth rate increases if the number of times an organism reproduction is more. Also, the number of new organism it produces each time. So when a reproduction is done, then also the total number of offsprings which are produced will also be very very important factor, because over here an organism who is reproducing maybe twice a year but only producing only four or two offsprings each time, as compared to an organism which is producing maybe several, maybe 12 or maybe 9, then obviously the population density will shift for that particular group. Also, how often it reproduces. So there are three important criteria on which we decide upon the uh, the growth models. Then growth models predict what will be the population at a given time. Now here we are going to study the two types of growth model, that is the exponential and the logistic growth model. The logistic growth model is also known as Varhul's Pearl logistic growth. Now if you see the diagram over here, the exponential growth over here is shown as blue, and the logistic is shown as the red mark over here. Now let us study one by one. When we talk of the exponential growth is actually taking place when the when their population is having unlimited supply of resources. That means there is no limiting factor, and as a result the population grows exponentially. So here the resources such as the food availability, and there is no competition for the space, then the population will grow exponentially. So here it is unlimited resources which are available to a particular species. So here we find that if the population of a size n over here, population size is n over here, then we find per capita birth rate. Population of size is equal to n, and per capita we find the birth rate we represent as B, and per capita death rate is represented as D. Then increase in the population at any given time, that is dn upon dt, is equal to B minus D into, that is B minus T into N. That is the population at a given time. And here if we put over R, which is an intrinsic rate of natural increase. So if we put the value over here, R B minus D is equal to R. So the entire equation will turn as dn upon dt is equal to R upon N. Now this R is also the Malthusian parameter. This R is also known as Malthusian parameter. Now in simple terms, if I say, over here from the equation you can make out that Malthusian parameter, or the intrinsic rate of natural increase, in simple terms it is the number of births minus the number of deaths. that will give the total number of individuals of a population which are surviving in that particular time. So per generation time. And over here, as you can see, if we plot a graph against population density versus time, we find the increase is exponential. Why? Because the resources are unlimited, and so the exponential curve is J-shaped curve. The exponential curve is J-shaped, and it is can be calculated as dn upon dt is equal to r, that is the intrinsic rate of natural increase, multiplied by n. This gives us the value or the idea of the exponential growth of the particular species. Now, also, now we will be studying about the logistic curve or the growth model. So logistic growth model is actually a more realistic one. It is because no species, no species is having unlimited supply of resources. So when we talk of logistic growth model is developed or is seen as a more realistic one, as the resources, such as there is no freely available food resource to a particular population or a species. Also, the species always faces the competition from other species or the members of its own species. So it is more realistic one. So over here we find it is actually limited resources, and only the fittest individual can survive. Only the fittest individual can survive. And over here, we find when we study, unlike exponential, where there is a constant increase in the number of individuals or the population density is continuously increasing along with the time due to unlimited supply or unlimited resource supply. Logistic, on the other hand, it has three phases. It will develop as three phases. The first phase is the lag phase. As you can see over here, the first phase is a lag phase. Lag phase is the period when there is an increase in the population, but the population, with the time, the population density will increase, but this increase is not very sharp. It will be a gradual increase followed by the accelerated phase. Accelerated phase where there is an increase. Over here we can see this is the lag phase. Now here there is an increase in the population density, that means the accelerated, and lastly we have the de-accelerated, where the species does not undergo any steep increase in the population density, and finally it reaches the carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is denoted as K. So over here, finally this phase is the carrying capacity. Now when we talk of the carrying capacity, it is the maximum size of the population that a habitat can allow it to sustain. That means, in simple, if we say the maximum carrying capacity is the maximum population size of a biological species that can sustain in that specific environment with the same resources availability. So there is no sudden increase or sudden decrease, but it will follow a fixed pattern: lag phase followed by the accelerated phase followed by deceleration, and finally the species reach to a stable condition, that is the carrying capacity. And if you observe carefully, the logistic curve is a sigmoid or S-shaped curve. It is S-shaped curve. So here we find it is S-shaped curve, and this will give us an idea, the equation. With the help of this equation we can find about the population growth. Now therefore we find over here from this you can understand very easily that out of the two curves which we have studied, that is the exponential as well as the logistic, the exponential will have is not considered to be more realistic, whereas logistic is considered to be realistic. Exponential always support the organism by unlimited supply of resources, whereas logistic has the limited supply of resources. The exponential curve will be a J-shaped curve. Logistic will show a sigmoid curve or the S-shaped curve, in which it will have the lag phase followed by the accelerated phase, the decelerated phase, and finally the population reaches carrying capacity. So here by this we can understand the growth of a population in a particular habitat.